Sit back, relax, and welcome to Reading Hours. Today's book is The Silent Patient by Michaelides. Please let us know in the comments from where you are watching, or if there is a book you want us to summarize in future. Some stories grip you not with their action, but with their silence. The Silent Patient by Michaelides is one such novel, a psychological thriller that lures readers into the depths of obsession, trauma, and the fragility of the human mind. Published in 2019, the book became an instant bestseller, captivating audiences with its intricate plot and shocking revelations. It's a novel that thrives on uncertainty, a carefully woven mystery that keeps readers questioning everything they think they know. At its core, The Silent Patient is the story of Alicia Berenson, a famous painter who seemingly has it all: a successful career, a devoted husband, and a beautiful home in London. But everything shatters one night when her husband, Gabriel, is found shot dead, and Alicia is discovered beside him, gun in hand. The most haunting detail: Alicia refuses to speak, not a single word, from the moment of Gabriel's murder onward. She is convicted, institutionalized, and branded by the media as an enigma, a woman whose silence is her only answer. Enter Theo Faber, a criminal psychotherapist determined to unlock Alicia's silence. His obsession with her case borders on unhealthy, as he sees her not just as a patient, but as a puzzle he is destined to solve. As he digs deeper into Alicia's past, peeling away layers of her life, he begins to uncover dark secrets about Alicia, about Gabriel, and even about himself. What makes The Silent Patient truly compelling is the way Michaelides plays with perspective and truth. Alicia's diary entries offer glimpses into her mind, yet they raise more questions than answers. Theo's own narrative, which should feel reliable, begins to twist under the weight of obsession. With themes of trauma, guilt, and the power of silence, the novel is not just a thriller. It's a deep psychological study of the stories we tell ourselves and the ones we choose to bury. From its first page, The Silent Patient draws readers into a world where truth is elusive and silence speaks louder than words. And as we step into this story, one thing is certain: nothing is as it seems. Alicia Berenson had a life that seemed picture perfect. She was a renowned painter, admired for her evocative and haunting artwork, and married to Gabriel, a successful fashion photographer whose work took him to glamorous locations around the world. Together, they lived in an elegant house in North London, their life resembling something out of a dream. But dreams can be deceptive, and behind the beauty of their life, something darker was lurking, something that no one, not even those closest to them, could see coming. The murder was as shocking as it was brutal. Gabriel Berenson was found tied to a chair in their home, his face unrecognizable after 5 gunshots fired at close range. Alicia, his beloved wife, was standing a few feet away, covered in blood, the gun still warm in her grasp. She did not scream. She did not plead. She did not try to escape. She simply stood there, silent. The case fascinated the public, capturing headlines across the nation. How could Alicia, a woman with no history of violence, a woman who appeared so devoted to her husband, commit such a crime? The mystery deepened when, from the moment of Gabriel's murder onward, Alicia refused to speak. Not a single word passed her lips. Not to the police, not to her lawyers, not even in her trial. It was as if, in taking Gabriel's life, she had also taken away her own voice. With no explanation, no testimony, and no defense, Alicia was quickly found guilty. The court ruled that she was unfit to stand trial and instead sentenced her to a secure forensic psychiatric unit, the Grove, a facility in North London known for housing the most disturbed criminal patients. There, Alicia was locked away, lost in her silence, as the world continued to speculate about the woman who had once been a rising star in the art world, but was now a prisoner of her own mind. Yet, despite her refusal to speak, Alicia did leave one clue. Shortly after Gabriel's death, Alicia had created a painting. It was her only response to the crime, the only time she had communicated anything about what had happened that night. The painting was a self-portrait, stark and chilling. She had titled it Alcestes, a name drawn from Greek mythology. In the myth, Alcestes was a woman who sacrificed herself to the underworld in place of her husband, choosing death over allowing him to perish. It was a tragic, selfless act. But Alicia's choice of title confused those who tried to analyze it. Was she portraying herself as a victim, as a martyr? Or was there a deeper, more sinister meaning hidden within the brushstrokes? The painting was met with both awe and horror, exhibited in a London gallery where it became the centerpiece of an artistic and psychological debate. Critics called it a masterpiece, an unsettling, enigmatic portrayal of a woman on the brink of something unfathomable. Others saw it as a confession, but Alicia remained silent, offering no answers, leaving the world to make its own interpretations. In the years following her institutionalization, Alicia's case faded from the front pages, but it never truly disappeared from public consciousness. The mystery of her silence continued to intrigue journalists, psychologists, and armchair detectives alike. What could drive a woman to commit such a crime and then refuse to speak of it? Was her silence an admission of guilt? Or was it a form of resistance against an injustice no one had yet uncovered? Many theories surfaced over time. Some believed Alicia had suffered a psychological break, that something inside her had snapped that night, rendering her mute. Others were convinced there was more to the story, that perhaps Alicia was innocent, and her silence was a response to trauma rather than guilt. But with no new developments and no word from Alicia herself, the speculation remained just that, speculation. The only person who still seemed determined to uncover the truth was Theo Faber. Theo was a criminal psychotherapist who had followed Alicia's case from the beginning. He had read every article, studied her trial, and obsessed over her painting. He believed that Alicia's silence was not mere defiance or madness. It was a symptom of something deeper, something buried in her past. And he was convinced that he was the one who could bring her back. When a job opening appeared at the Grove, Theo seized the opportunity. It was no accident that he ended up there. He had planned it, maneuvered it, ensured that he would be the one to gain access to Alicia Berenson. Others had tried and failed to reach her, but Theo was different. He understood her pain. He had battled his own demons, had experienced trauma of his own. He believed that if anyone could make Alicia speak, it was him. Theo's motivations were not purely professional. While he told himself that he wanted to help Alicia, there was a deeper, more personal reason for his fascination with her case. He saw something of himself in her silence, something that called to him in a way he couldn't fully explain. Perhaps he believed that in saving Alicia, he could somehow save himself. His first day at the Grove was unsettling. The facility was cold, clinical, filled with patients who had long been abandoned by the world. These were people who had committed horrific crimes, individuals deemed too dangerous or unstable to be part of society. And now, Alicia Berenson was one of them. Theo's first glimpse of Alicia was through a window as he walked past her room. She sat on her bed, staring blankly at the wall, her face unreadable. She was thinner than he had expected, her once vibrant red hair now dull, her skin pale from years spent indoors. But despite her fragile appearance, there was something intense about her, something that made it impossible to look away. He could feel the weight of her silence, even from a distance. As he walked into the meeting with his new colleagues, Theo knew he was facing an uphill battle. The staff at the Grove had given up on Alicia long ago. "She won't talk," one of the senior psychiatrists told him flatly. "She hasn't spoken a word in years. You won't be the one to change that." Theo disagreed. He had spent years preparing for this moment. He believed that Alicia's silence was not an act of defiance, but a defense mechanism, a shield protecting her from a truth too painful to face. If he could find a way through that shield, if he could uncover what had really happened the night Gabriel died, then perhaps he could make Alicia speak again. But what he didn't yet realize was that some truths are more dangerous than silence. Theo Faber was no stranger to broken minds. As a forensic psychotherapist, he had spent years working with patients whose grasp on reality had slipped through their fingers. He had studied delusions, paranoia, and trauma in all its forms, but nothing intrigued him more than Alicia Berenson. Her case wasn't just another professional challenge, it had become an obsession, a puzzle that demanded solving. Alicia had been silent for 6 years. During that time, psychiatrists, lawyers, and journalists had tried to coax words from her, but she remained unmoved. She was locked inside her own mind, beyond reach. But Theo believed he could succeed where others had failed. He told himself it wasn't arrogance, he simply understood something they didn't. Alicia's silence was not just an act of defiance, it was a response to something. And if he could uncover the right trigger, if he could unlock the past, she might finally speak. His first official meeting with Alicia took place in a small therapy room at the Grove. The space was bare, sterile, with gray walls and a single wooden table in the center. Alicia was already seated when Theo arrived, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She didn't look up as he entered, but he could feel her awareness of him, a subtle shift in the air. She was thinner than he had expected. Her once radiant skin had turned pale from years spent indoors, and her red hair, once fiery, now seemed dull. But her eyes, her sharp green eyes, still held something intense, something unreadable. Theo sat down across from her, placing his notebook on the table. He let a few moments of silence pass before speaking. "Hello, Alicia," he said gently. "I'm Theo. I'll be working with you from now on." No response. He wasn't surprised. He had expected this, but he wasn't deterred. He continued, keeping his voice soft and unthreatening. "I've read a lot about you," he said. "I know that people have tried to make you talk before. I know that you've chosen silence." He paused. "I'm not here to pressure you. I just want to understand." Still, Alicia gave no indication that she had heard him. She remained perfectly still, her eyes fixed on some invisible point in the distance. Theo observed her carefully. Even in her silence, she was expressive. There was something in the way she held herself, rigid, guarded. A woman who had built walls around herself, walls that no one had yet managed to break through. He decided to shift his approach. "I saw your painting," he said. "Alcestes." That got a reaction, small but noticeable. Alicia's fingers tightened slightly in her lap. A flicker of something, recognition, discomfort, passed through her expression. Theo pressed on. "It's a fascinating piece, dark but powerful. The title is interesting too. Do you see yourself as Alcestes?" "Nothing." But now he was sure of it. She was listening. He let the silence stretch between them, allowing her time to react. When she didn't, he leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I don't believe you're incapable of speaking," he said finally. "I think you're choosing not to." Still, she remained unmoved. Theo had expected resistance, but he wasn't discouraged. He knew he couldn't force a breakthrough in their first session. Trust would take time, and Alicia was a long way from trusting anyone. But he had planted a seed, and now he had to be patient. As the session ended, he gathered his notes and stood. "I'll see you soon, Alicia," he said. She didn't look at him, but as he walked out of the room, he had the distinct feeling that she was watching him. Back in his office, Theo reflected on their meeting. He knew Alicia's silence wouldn't break easily, but he had sensed something, a shift, however small. The mention of Alcestes had stirred something in her. That was the key. But what exactly did it mean? He decided to dig deeper into Alicia's past. If he was going to help her, he needed to understand her fully, not just the woman she had become after Gabriel's murder, but the woman she had been before it. Her background was well documented. Alicia had lost her parents at a young age. Her mother, Eva, had died in a car accident when Alicia was a teenager. Her father, Vernon, had never been warm or loving. In fact, he had once told her cruelly that he wished she had died instead of her mother. Theo recognized trauma when he saw it. Alicia's childhood had been shaped by loss and emotional neglect. She had married Gabriel young, perhaps seeking the stability and love she had never received from her father. And then, 6 years ago, everything had shattered in a single violent night. He was certain that the answers lay in her past. He needed to find a way in, to unravel her silence, one thread at a time. But as he dug deeper, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he wasn't seeing. Something hidden beneath the surface, waiting to emerge. And when it did, it would change everything. Theo couldn't stop thinking about Alicia's painting. Alcestes was more than just art. It was a message, a puzzle waiting to be solved. He needed to understand why she had chosen that particular myth, why that story had resonated with her so deeply that she had made it her sole response to Gabriel's murder. If he could decipher what it meant to her, he believed it could be the key to unlocking her silence. His first step was research. Late into the night, he pored over different interpretations of the myth, searching for clues. The story of Alcestes was one of love, sacrifice, and death. In Greek mythology, Alcestes was the devoted wife of Admetus, a king who was fated to die young. When the gods allowed someone to take his place in death, Alcestes stepped forward, offering her life to save her husband's. She descended into the underworld, but before she could be lost forever, Hercules intervened, bringing her back to the world of the living. It was a tale of ultimate devotion, of a woman who gave everything for her husband. But how did that connect to Alicia? Was she saying that she had sacrificed herself for Gabriel? That she had died in some metaphorical way the night of his murder? Or was it the opposite? Did she see Gabriel as Admetus, the one who had demanded the sacrifice? And if so, was she Alcestes, the willing victim? Or was she someone else entirely, someone who had refused to be sacrificed? Theo felt like he was circling the truth, but it remained just out of reach. Determined to learn more, he turned his attention to the people who had known Alicia best. If he wanted to understand her, he needed to see her through the eyes of those who had been closest to her before the murder. His first stop was Jean Felix Martin, the owner of the gallery where Alicia had exhibited her work. Jean Felix had been one of her closest friends, or at least, that was how he presented himself. Theo wasn't entirely convinced of his sincerity. There was something slippery about the man, something calculating behind his carefully curated charm. Jean Felix greeted Theo in his gallery, a sleek, modern space filled with abstract paintings. He led him to the back, where a single canvas hung on the wall. It was Alcestis. Even in the artificial light of the gallery, the painting was haunting. Alicia had painted herself in stark, almost ghostly tones. Her face was expressionless, her eyes dark pools of shadow. Behind her loomed the faint outline of a man, Gabriel, or someone else. The most unsettling part was her mouth. It was sewn shut with thick, black stitches. She finished it right before she was arrested, Jean Felix said, watching Theo closely. It was her last piece. Theo studied the painting, his mind racing. The stitches over Alicia's mouth, it was too obvious to be a coincidence. She had silenced herself deliberately. The question was, why? Did she say anything about it? Theo asked. Jean Felix shook his head. Not much. But she was. Different when she painted it. Distant. Almost hypnotized. It was like she was exercising something. Theo turned to him. Exercising what? Jean Felix gave a slight shrug, his lips curling into a smirk. That's what you're here to find out, isn't it? Theo didn't like the way he said that. He could sense that Jean Felix knew more than he was letting on. But pressing him too hard now wouldn't get him anywhere. Instead, he filed away the information for later. His next visit was to Alicia's cousin, Paul Rose. Paul lived in a cramped, run-down house on the outskirts of London, a far cry from the elegance of Alicia's old life. He was a nervous man, shifting from foot to foot as he let Theo inside. I haven't seen Alicia in years, Paul admitted, rubbing his hands together anxiously. Not since before everything happened. Theo noted the hesitation. But you were close when you were younger, Paul nodded. As close as we could be, our family wasn't. Affectionate? That was an understatement. Theo had already uncovered fragments of Alicia's childhood, her mother's death, her father's cruelty. He needed to hear it from someone who had been there. Her father, Theo said carefully. Vernon, what was he like? Paul's jaw tightened. He was a bastard. Theo waited. Paul sighed, running a hand through his unkempt hair. He never wanted Alicia. After Eva died, he barely spoke to her, and when he did, it was just to remind her that she was a disappointment. Theo recalled the story he had read in Alicia's old diary, the night her father had told her, with cold finality, that he wished she had died instead of her mother. The weight of those words must have been unbearable for a teenage girl. Did she ever talk about it? Theo asked. Paul hesitated, then shook his head. Not really. She never liked talking about the past. He gave a small, bitter smile. But she carried it with her. You could see it in her paintings. Theo nodded. That fit. Alicia had always communicated through her art. Alcestis wasn't the first time she had used painting to express something unspoken. He wondered how many other buried secrets were hidden in her canvases. As he left Paul's house, Theo felt the pieces shifting into place. Alicia's silence hadn't begun with Gabriel's murder. It had started much earlier, with a childhood filled with loss and rejection. She had learned, long before that fateful night, that speaking up only led to pain. Back at the Grove, Theo prepared for his next session with Alicia. This time, he wouldn't push her to speak. Instead, he would show her that he understood, that he saw her. As he stepped into the therapy room, Alicia was already seated, her gaze distant. Theo sat down across from her and, without a word, slid a printout onto the table. It was an image of Alcestes. Alicia's eyes flickered to it just for a moment. Theo spoke softly. "You don't have to say anything, but I want you to know I'm listening." For the first time, Alicia looked at him. Not a glance, not a passing flicker, but a real, steady gaze. And in that moment, Theo knew. She had something to say. He just had to find a way to hear it. Theo could feel it. He was getting closer. Alicia's reaction to the printout of Alcestes had been small, fleeting, but it was real. For the first time, she had looked at him with something more than blank detachment. It was as if, for just a moment, the wall she had built around herself had cracked. But a crack wasn't enough. He needed to break through completely. As he sat in his office after their last session, he reviewed everything he had learned so far. Alicia's silence was more than just a psychological response to trauma. It was a carefully constructed defense, one she had built long before Gabriel's murder. The question was, what was she protecting? And why had she chosen silence as her shield? Theo decided it was time to shift his strategy. If she wouldn't speak, maybe she would respond to something else. He arrived at their next session with a small notebook in hand. He placed it on the table between them. "I thought you might like this," he said. Alicia didn't move. "It's just a blank journal," Theo continued. "No pressure, but if you ever feel like writing something, anything, you can use this." Silence. Theo wasn't expecting immediate success. He knew trust had to be earned, so he let the moment pass without pushing further. Instead, he changed the subject. "I've been speaking to some people who knew you before," he said, watching her carefully. Alicia's fingers twitched in her lap. "I spoke to Jean Felix," he continued. "He still has Alcestes at the gallery. He says it was your last painting." No response, but he could sense the tension in her shoulders. "And I met Paul, your cousin." That got a reaction. Alicia's lips pressed together, ever so slightly. "He told me about your father," Theo said gently. "About what he said to you." Alicia's entire body stiffened. Theo leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "That must have been unbearable." Alicia's gaze dropped to the floor. He wasn't sure if it was shame, anger, or grief. Maybe all three. He let the silence linger. "I want to understand you, Alicia," he said finally. "But I can only do that if you let me in." Still, she didn't speak. But something had changed. For the first time, Alicia seemed visibly affected by their conversation. The walls weren't just cracking, they were shifting. As their session ended, Theo stood and gave her a small nod. "I'll see you soon." Alicia remained motionless as he left the room. But as the door closed behind him, he had the distinct feeling that she was watching him again. That night, Theo's mind wouldn't rest. He had made progress, but he needed more. He needed to find the missing piece. He decided to pay a visit to Alicia's former home. It was still standing, though it had been abandoned since the murder. The real estate company had tried to sell it, but no one wanted a house where such a brutal crime had taken place. Theo walked up the path, his footsteps crunching against the gravel. The windows were dark, the air heavy with an eerie stillness. He wasn't supposed to be there, but he had come too far to turn back now. He pressed his hand against the front door. Locked, of course. But as he stepped back, something caught his eye movement near the garden. A figure. Theo tensed, his pulse quickening. Who else would be here? The figure turned. It was a man, older, with a weathered face and sharp eyes. He regarded Theo with suspicion. "You're trespassing," the man said. Theo swallowed his nerves and stepped forward. "I'm a psychotherapist. I work with Alicia." The man's expression darkened. "You shouldn't be here," he said gruffly. Theo frowned. "Who are you?" The man hesitated, then sighed. "I'm the neighbor," he admitted. "I lived next door to them for years." Theo's mind raced. This was an opportunity. "Did you know Alicia well?" he asked. The neighbor scoffed. "As well as anyone could know her, she kept to herself." But Gabriel, now he was different, friendly, charming, the kind of man everyone liked. Theo studied him. "Did you ever hear anything?" "Arguments," the neighbor hesitated. "Once," he admitted. "A few days before it happened, I heard shouting. It wasn't like them." Theo's heart pounded. "Did you hear what they were arguing about?" The neighbor shook his head. "No, but she was crying, and he was angry, really angry." Alicia, crying, Gabriel, furious. A dark feeling settled in Theo's stomach. Something was wrong. Something had happened before that night, something no one had talked about. And if he was going to get the truth, he needed Alicia to tell him. The next day, when Theo arrived for their session, he noticed something different. Alicia was holding the journal he had given her, and on the first page, in small, delicate handwriting, she had written one word. "No." Theo stared at it for a long moment. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Theo stared at the single word Alicia had written in the journal. No, it wasn't a confession. It wasn't an explanation, but it was something. After months of complete silence, Alicia had finally responded, even if only with a single word. It told him she had heard him, that she was aware of his presence, that she was engaged, even if she wasn't ready to fully open up yet. But what did it mean? No to what? No, she didn't want to talk. No, he hadn't understood her. No, she wasn't ready. He had a dozen questions, but he forced himself to stay patient. Pushing too hard might make her withdraw again. He looked up at Alicia, meeting her gaze. She was watching him closely, her expression unreadable. "I see you wrote something," he said, his voice calm and even. "That's good." She didn't react. Theo considered his next move carefully. No to what, Alicia? Nothing. She stared at him for a long moment, then, without a word, she closed the journal and set it aside. The conversation was over. Theo exhaled, keeping his disappointment in check. He couldn't let her see his frustration. Instead, he nodded, as if this was exactly what he had expected. "That's fine," he said. "We'll talk again soon." As he left the room, he felt a flicker of something strange, a shift, the sense that Alicia was no longer just a silent patient sitting before him. She was watching, evaluating, testing him. That night, Theo's mind raced. He replayed every interaction he'd had with Alicia, every clue, every inconsistency. The argument the neighbor had overheard, Alicia's haunting painting of Alcestes, the way she reacted when he mentioned her father. There was a thread connecting all of these things. But he needed more, so he went back to the source. The next morning, Theo found himself at the Grove's administrative office, speaking to Professor Diones, the facility's head psychiatrist. Diones was an imposing man, a Greek psychiatrist with years of experience. He had a deep respect for Alicia, though he had long since given up hope that she would ever speak again. "You believe she can recover?" Diones asked, his sharp eyes studying Theo. "I do," Theo said firmly. Diones sighed. "Then you're more optimistic than I am." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "What do you want to know?" Theo hesitated before speaking. "I want to look at Alicia's files. I need to know more about her therapy before I arrived." Guillaume studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Fine," he said. "But be careful, Theo. Alicia isn't just any patient, she is different." Theo didn't need the warning. He already knew. He spent the next few hours combing through Alicia's medical records, session notes, and reports from the doctors who had worked with her before him. Most of it was unsurprising. Dozens of failed therapy attempts, doctors growing frustrated with her silence, pages of clinical observations that led nowhere. But then he found something strange. An entry from Christian, one of the other therapists. He had been assigned to Alicia months before Theo arrived. His notes were sparse. He, like the others, had made little progress with her. But one detail stood out: medication levels adjusted. Patient showing signs of agitation. Possible adverse reaction. Theo frowned. Why had her medication been adjusted? He scanned further. There were more notes, references to Alicia becoming more withdrawn, more anxious. A mention of her having a severe reaction during one session, though there were no details on what had happened. Something wasn't right. Theo had never trusted Christian. There was something smug about the man, something territorial. He acted as if Alicia belonged to him, as if he had some sort of claim over her case. Theo needed to find out what he had done. That afternoon, Theo confronted Christian in the staff lounge. "I was going through Alicia's files," Theo said casually. "I saw that you adjusted her medication before I got here." Christian gave him a slow, knowing smirk, and Theo crossed his arms. "Why?" Christian leaned back in his chair. "Because she needed it. She was getting worse, not better." Theo narrowed his eyes. "But the medication made her more agitated, didn't it?" Christian shrugged. "She was already agitated. I just tried to manage it." Theo could feel his pulse quicken. "What exactly did you give her?" Christian's smirk faltered just slightly. "You're overthinking it," he said. "She was a lost cause, Theo. Nothing was working. I did what I had to do." Theo clenched his jaw. He didn't have proof, but he knew Christian was hiding something. He turned to leave, but before he walked away, he said, "You know, Christian, I've noticed something. She's been more responsive since I started working with her." Christian's expression darkened. "She even wrote something in a journal today." Theo watched Christian's reaction carefully. For the first time, the smirk was gone. That night, Theo couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. It was irrational, but he couldn't ignore it. He locked his doors, pulled the curtains closed. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. He told himself he was imagining things. But as he drifted off to sleep, one thought lingered in his mind. Alicia had written no. No to what? No to talking. Or no to the story the world had built around her. No, she wasn't insane. No, she wasn't guilty. Theo didn't know the answer, but he knew one thing for certain. He was closer to the truth than ever. Theo's mind was racing. Alicia's single word, no, echoed in his thoughts. It wasn't just an answer. It was a rejection. But of what? The deeper he went, the more uneasy he felt. Christian had tampered with Alicia's medication. He had admitted it without much concern, brushing it off as a necessary measure. But Theo wasn't convinced. The way Christian reacted when he mentioned Alicia's journal, that flicker of something in his expression, told Theo that Christian was hiding more than just an ill-advised medical adjustment. The question was, what was he trying to suppress? The next day, Theo entered the therapy room with a new strategy in mind. He needed to push Alicia further, but not too far, just enough to see how deep the crack in her silence went. She was already seated when he arrived, the blank journal resting on the table between them. She wasn't holding it, but its presence alone was a sign. Theo sat down across from her. He didn't reach for the journal, didn't acknowledge it. Instead, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Alicia," he said softly, "I think I understand." Her head didn't move, but her eyes flickered toward him. A small shift, but noticeable. "I understand why you don't speak. It's not that you can't," he paused. "It's that you won't." Her fingers twitched slightly against the fabric of her sleeve. "I think something happened the night Gabriel was killed, something no one else knows." Silence. "I spoke to your neighbor," he continued. "He heard you crying. He heard Gabriel shouting. That was before the murder." Alicia's breathing changed. "You weren't just a woman who snapped one night," Theo pressed gently. "Something happened, something important, and you've been carrying it alone all this time." Alicia's gaze was steady now, fixed on him. She wasn't looking away. Theo exhaled. "You don't have to tell me, not yet, but I want you to know I'm listening." Still, Alicia didn't speak, but Theo could feel it. The tension in the air was different. Before, she had been distant, detached. Now she was present. And then, something unexpected happened. She reached for the journal. She didn't open it, didn't write anything down, but the fact that she touched it at all was progress. A sign that, slowly, something was shifting. That night, Theo lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. There was another piece of the puzzle missing, something outside of Alicia herself, something bigger. So he went back to the beginning. Gabriel. Theo had spent so much time trying to understand Alicia, but what if the real key was her husband? What kind of man had he been? On the surface, Gabriel had been the perfect husband, handsome, talented, adored by his friends. But Theo had seen it too many times before. People weren't always who they seemed to be. Alicia had painted him with a gun to his head, not herself. Him. What if Gabriel wasn't the victim Alicia's silence made him out to be? The next morning, Theo arranged to meet with Gabriel's brother, Max. Max Berenson was nothing like his brother. Where Gabriel had been charming and magnetic, Max was reserved, awkward, and strangely bitter. They met at a small cafe near Max's office. He greeted Theo stiffly, suspicion written all over his face. "I'm not sure why you wanted to meet," Max said, stirring his coffee. "I've told the police everything I know." Theo watched him carefully. "I wanted to understand Gabriel better, what kind of husband he was." Max let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "A good husband, a great one. He adored Alicia." Theo leaned back. "And yet she killed him." Max's expression darkened. "So they say." Theo caught the phrasing, "so they say." "You don't think she did it?" Max hesitated, his fingers tightening around his cup. "I don't know what to think," he sighed. "I knew Gabriel better than anyone. He was a good man." But, Max shook his head. "Never mind." Theo didn't press him yet. Instead, he changed direction. "I heard Alicia and Gabriel had an argument a few days before the murder." Max's jaw clenched. "Where did you hear that?" "From a neighbor." Max exhaled sharply. "I don't know what they were arguing about. Gabriel didn't talk about that stuff with me." Theo studied him. He was lying, or at least, he was withholding something. Did Gabriel ever mention Alicia being unstable? Theo asked carefully. Max scoffed. She was always unstable. He tried to help her, but she was impossible. She would have these moods, these dark spells. Gabriel would call me sometimes, worried. He wanted to fix her. Theo's stomach twisted. Fix her. It was the way Max said it, the same way people spoke about broken objects, not a person. I always told him to leave her, Max continued bitterly. He could have had any woman he wanted, but he chose her, and look how that turned out. Theo felt a rush of unease. There was something in Max's tone, something laced with resentment. He could tell Max wasn't saying everything he knew, but for now, he had enough. Thank you for your time, Theo said, standing up. Max barely acknowledged him. He just stirred his coffee, lost in thought. Theo returned to the grove with a sinking feeling. Alicia wasn't just a silent patient. She was a woman trapped inside a story that had been written for her. And every person in her life, Christian, Max, Jean Felix, had played a role in silencing her. But Theo wasn't here to silence her. He was here to make her speak. And this time, he had a feeling she just might. Alicia sat across from Theo in the therapy room, her hands resting on the journal, but not opening it. Her expression was calm, unreadable. Yet there was something different, something beneath the surface. Theo had spent weeks chipping away at her silence, and now, for the first time, he felt a shift. She wasn't just ignoring him anymore. She was watching, listening. She was waiting. Theo leaned forward. Alicia, I saw Max. Her fingers tightened slightly on the journal. It was barely noticeable, but Theo caught it. He told me Gabriel was always trying to fix you, Theo continued. He made it sound like you were broken. Alicia's gaze flickered, a shadow passing across her face. Did Gabriel ever say that to you? Silence. Theo studied her, then changed tactics. What if I told you Max doesn't seem convinced that you killed Gabriel? Alicia's eyes snapped to his. There it was. A reaction. She was expecting him to believe the story the world had created about her, that she was a cold-blooded murderer, a woman who had snapped. But now, Theo was forcing her to consider another possibility. That someone else had doubts. That someone else had seen what she had seen. Alicia's breathing changed just slightly. She looked away, her fingers loosening on the journal, and then, in an unexpected motion, she opened it. She picked up the pen and she started to write. Theo watched in silence as Alicia's pen moved across the page, her handwriting swift and deliberate. He didn't speak. He didn't dare interrupt her. When she was finished, she pushed the journal toward him. Theo hesitated, then picked it up. The words on the page sent a chill down his spine. It was never about Gabriel. Theo's pulse quickened. He read the words again, trying to absorb them fully. What do you mean? He asked carefully. Alicia didn't answer. Theo looked at her, searching for any sign of what she was thinking. Was she finally admitting she didn't kill him? Was she saying there was something bigger at play? He pressed on. If it wasn't about Gabriel, then who was it about? Alicia's lips parted slightly, as if she might speak. But then, she closed her mouth again. And just like that, the moment was gone. She had given him something, but not everything. Theo knew better than to push too hard. He needed to give her time. Still, the words haunted him. It was never about Gabriel. Then, who was it about? That night, Theo pored over the journal entries Alicia had written before she stopped speaking. Most of them were filled with cryptic, fragmented thoughts. Images, descriptions, references to her paintings. But there was something deeper woven through them, something that suggested she was trying to say something without actually saying it. And then, there was a passage that caught his attention. It was written in a hurried, frantic scrawl, different from the rest. "I saw him. I know him. He watches me even when I sleep." Theo felt a chill run through him. Who was she talking about? His mind raced through the possibilities. A stalker, a stranger, or someone closer. The thought unsettled him. Alicia hadn't just killed Gabriel in a fit of madness. There was someone else in this story, someone no one else had seen, someone she was afraid of. The next morning, Theo arrived at the Grove with a renewed sense of urgency. He had been playing a careful game, working his way into Alicia's trust. But now he realized he needed to move faster. He had to find out who he was. But before he could reach Alicia's room, Diomes stopped him. "We need to talk," the psychiatrist said. Theo frowned. "About what?" Diomes' expression was unreadable. "About Alicia." They stepped into his office, and Diomes gestured for Theo to sit. "I hear she's been responding to you," Diomes said. "That's impressive." Theo nodded cautiously. "I think we're making progress." Diomes steepled his fingers. "That's why I need to warn you." Theo stiffened. "Warn me," Diomes sighed. "You're getting too close." Theo's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" Diomes studied him carefully. "Alicia has been silent for a reason. The moment she speaks, the story changes. And not everyone wants that." Theo's skin prickled. "Are you saying someone doesn't want her to recover?" Diomes didn't answer directly. Instead, he leaned forward. "Be careful, Theo. Some truths are better left buried." Theo stared at him, his mind racing. Who was Diomes protecting? And more importantly, how far would they go to keep Alicia silent? That evening, Theo sat in his car outside the Grove, his thoughts a storm of confusion and unease. He had entered this case thinking it was about helping Alicia speak. But now he realized it wasn't just about Alicia anymore. It was about who wanted her to stay silent, and why. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. When the call connected, he said, "I need to talk to Jean Felix." If anyone knew the truth about Alicia's past, it was her closest friend. And Theo was done waiting for the answers to come to him. He was going to find them himself. Theo sat in a dimly lit cafe, his fingers wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Across from him sat Jean Felix Martin, Alicia's former gallery owner and longtime friend. The man fidgeted with the sugar packet in his hands, his gaze darting around the cafe as if nervous about being seen here. Theo had called him under the pretense of discussing Alicia's artwork, but he knew there was more to Jean Felix than just being her business associate. He had always hovered around her life, orbiting just close enough to be significant, but never quite stepping fully into the light. "You said you wanted to talk about Alicia," Jean Felix said, finally looking at Theo. "What about her?" Theo leaned in slightly. "I want to know about the time before Gabriel's murder, the weeks leading up to it. Did you notice anything strange?" Jean Felix gave a dry, humorless chuckle. Everything about Alicia was strange. Theo didn't react. He just waited. Jean Felix sighed, stirring his coffee absently. "Look, Alicia wasn't. Well, she was struggling. But I don't believe she killed him." The words sent a jolt through Theo. "You don't?" Jean Felix shook his head. "No, I never did." Theo studied him. "Then why didn't you say that in court?" Jean Felix laughed bitterly. "Do you think anyone would have listened? Everyone wanted her to be guilty. It made sense. The silent, disturbed wife. The perfect victim turned murderer. It was a story they could understand." Theo's pulse quickened. This was the first time someone was openly admitting doubt. "If she didn't do it," Theo said slowly. "Then who did?" Jean Felix hesitated. "I don't know," he said finally. "But But I do know she was afraid. Theo's grip tightened on his cup. Afraid of what? Jean Felix exhaled. I don't know who, but I remember her talking about seeing someone. A man. She wouldn't say much, but she said he was watching her, following her. Theo felt a chill creep up his spine. A stalker? He asked. Jean Felix nodded. That's what I thought at first. But then she stopped talking about it, and I figured maybe it was just her paranoia getting worse. Theo's mind was racing. Alicia had written in her journal, I saw him. I know him. He watches me even when I sleep. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. There was someone. And whoever he was close enough to Alicia that she felt threatened, but powerless to stop him. What if this man had something to do with Gabriel's murder? Theo asked. Jean Felix's jaw tightened. Then you're asking the wrong person, Theo frowned. Who should I be asking? Jean Felix hesitated again, then leaned forward slightly. Max, he said. Theo's breath hitched. Gabriel's brother. What about him? Theo pressed. Jean Felix looked uncomfortable. Max had feelings for Alicia. It was obvious. He was always around, always finding excuses to see her, and she couldn't stand him. Theo's chest tightened. Did she ever say why? Jean Felix shook his head. Not directly. But I remember one time, just a few weeks before Gabriel died, she came to my gallery upset. She wouldn't tell me what happened, but she said something like, he won't leave me alone. Theo's skin prickled. You think she was talking about Max? Jean Felix's expression darkened. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised. Theo leaned back, his mind spinning. Alicia was afraid of someone, and if it was Max, then the entire story was about to change. That evening, Theo sat in his office at the Grove, rereading Alicia's journal. Her words carried new weight now. Her silence was never about guilt. It was about something deeper. Fear. Max Berenson had never been fully investigated. He had been questioned, of course, but he had always positioned himself as the grieving brother, too devastated to be involved. But what if he wasn't grieving? What if he was hiding? Theo knew he had to confront him, but first, he needed more from Alicia. The next morning, he found her in the therapy room, seated as always, staring at the window. The journal was closed in front of her. He sat across from her, watching her carefully. Alicia, he said quietly, I spoke to Jean Felix. Her fingers twitched slightly. He told me you were afraid before Gabriel died. No reaction. He told me someone was watching you. Alicia's lips parted slightly, her breath hitching just a little. You don't have to tell me his name, Theo said gently. Just tell me if I'm right. Silence. Then, slowly, painfully, Alicia nodded. Theo felt his heart pound. He leaned in closer. Alicia, did this man hurt you? Alicia blinked, and for the first time, Theo saw something raw and vulnerable in her eyes. Then, after weeks, months of silence, she spoke. One word, a whisper. Yes, Theo's breath caught in his throat. She had spoken, and the truth was finally coming. The moment Alicia spoke, the room seemed to shrink, pulling Theo into a space where only the two of them existed. The word, just a single, whispered yes, echoed in his mind, filling the silence that had defined her for so long. He forced himself to stay calm, though his pulse was hammering in his ears. He had been waiting for this moment, fighting for it, and now that it had come, he was terrified of pushing too hard. Alicia had admitted she had been hurt. But by whom? Theo leaned forward carefully. Alicia, the man who hurt you, was it Max Berenson? Alicia's expression flickered, something between surprise and hesitation, but she didn't answer. Theo's mind raced. If it wasn't Max, then who? A new thought chilled him. What about Gabriel? he asked softly. Alicia stiffened. Her reaction was immediate, visceral. Her hands clenched in her lap, her shoulders tightening, her breathing shallower. It was the strongest response he had seen from her yet. Theo swallowed. Did Gabriel know? Alicia's lips parted, and for a second, Theo thought she might speak again. But then she shook her head. It wasn't a clear no, but something else. Something more complicated. He had to tread carefully. Theo exhaled slowly. Alicia, if you want to tell me, you can. I promise I'll believe you. Alicia's gaze locked onto his, searching him, weighing his words. Then, in a slow, deliberate motion, she reached for the journal. She flipped through the pages until she found what she was looking for. Then, she turned the journal toward Theo. The words were written in sharp, hurried handwriting, unlike her usual neat script. A raw, desperate confession. I loved Gabriel, but he betrayed me. Theo felt a chill crawl up his spine. Betrayal. That single word changed everything. He read it again, his mind working through the implications. Had Gabriel known about the man who had hurt her? Had he ignored it, allowed it, or had he been part of it? Theo looked up at Alicia, but her expression was closed off again. The moment was slipping. He had to keep her talking. Alicia, he said carefully, I need to understand. What did Gabriel do? Alicia exhaled shakily, her fingers tightening around the edge of the journal. And then, slowly, she started to write. Theo barely breathed as Alicia's pen moved across the page. When she finished, she slid the journal back to him. Theo, read the words once. Then again and again. His stomach dropped. He let him in. Theo's breath came shallow. Alicia was trembling now, her body rigid, her gaze locked on the floor. He let him in. Gabriel had let him in. Theo's mind reeled. Alicia hadn't just been a victim. She had been betrayed in the worst way possible. Whoever this man was, the one who had hurt her, Gabriel had known. He had allowed it. And in that moment, Alicia's entire story shifted. This wasn't about love turned to madness. This was about trust turned to devastation. Theo reached for Alicia's hand without thinking. She flinched, but didn't pull away. Alicia, his voice was barely above a whisper. Tell me what happened that night. Alicia was shaking now, her breath uneven. But she was there, fully present in the moment, no longer slipping away. And then she started writing again. The night Gabriel died, Alicia had been waiting for him to come home. She had been uneasy all day, her thoughts spiraling back to the feeling that she was being watched. And then, as the hours passed, that unease turned to certainty. She was being watched. She had seen him again. The man, standing outside the house, waiting. And when Gabriel finally arrived home, Alicia ran to him, desperate, breathless, telling him they needed to leave, to go somewhere safe. But Gabriel had looked past her. He had looked toward the door, and then he had unlocked it. He had let him in. Alicia's heart had pounded in her ears as the masked man entered their home. She had begged Gabriel to stop, to do something, but he had just stood there, still, silent, like this had all been planned, like he had known, like he had chosen. Alicia's pen scraped harshly across the paper as she wrote, the memory consuming her. The man had tied them both to chairs. He had stood in front of them, silent, holding a gun. And then he had turned to Gabriel, and he had asked a question. Do you want me to kill her? Theo's pulse roared in his ears. He read the words again, unable to believe them. Gabriel had been given a choice, and he had answered. Yes. Theo's throat tightened, nausea rising in his stomach. Gabriel had chosen himself. He had chosen his own survival over Alicia's. And that was the moment Alicia had broken. The masked man had turned the gun on Gabriel instead. And Alicia had done nothing to stop it. The shot rang out. Gabriel fell. And in the aftermath, Alicia had taken the gun. She had pressed it to her own head, ready to die too. But she hadn't pulled the trigger. Instead, she had gone silent. She had become silent. Because the world had already made its decision. Gabriel was the victim. Alicia was the murderer. And the man who had truly done it, he had simply vanished. Theo closed the journal, his hands shaking. This wasn't just a confession. This was the truth. A truth that had been buried, twisted, turned into something it had never been. And now, finally, Alicia had given it voice. Theo exhaled sharply, his mind spinning. The case wasn't just about proving Alicia's innocence anymore. It was about finding the man who had really been there that night. The man who had pulled the trigger. The man who had disappeared. And Theo had a sickening feeling that he already knew who it was. Theo sat in his office, the weight of Alicia's confession pressing down on him like an unbearable force. The truth was written in her journal, the pages still slightly smudged from the urgency with which she had recorded it. He ran a hand over his face, his mind spinning. Everything he had believed about this case, everything the world had believed, was a lie. Gabriel had betrayed her. Alicia hadn't killed him in cold blood. She had been framed, and the real killer had walked away, leaving her to take the fall. Theo exhaled shakily, piecing together the final puzzle. The masked man had entered the house that night. He had tied both Alicia and Gabriel to chairs. He had given Gabriel a choice, his life or Alicia's. And Gabriel had chosen to save himself. That was the moment Alicia had broken. But the real horror, the real twist in all of this, Theo had known it all along. Because he was the masked man. The truth sat in his gut like poison. Theo had followed Alicia for weeks before the murder. He had watched her from the shadows, lingering outside her home, standing beneath streetlights, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. He had been obsessed with her, not in a romantic way, not exactly. It was something deeper, darker. It had started the moment he read her diary. Her pain had called to him, whispering secrets he had long buried within himself. He understood her because he had once been her silent, suffering, unseen. And that night, he had wanted her to see him, to understand him, so he had put on the mask. He had broken into their house. He had tied them both up. And when he asked Gabriel if he wanted Alicia to die, when Gabriel had whispered yes, Theo had turned the gun on him instead. Because Alicia had deserved the truth. She had deserved to know that the man she loved would have let her die. But something had gone wrong. Alicia hadn't thanked him. She hadn't understood. She had looked at him with horror, her eyes wide, her breath shallow. She hadn't seen him as her savior. She had seen him as a monster. And in that moment, Theo had realized his mistake. She wouldn't love him for this. She wouldn't understand, so he had done the only thing he could. He had left, and he had let Alicia take the fall. Theo sat in silence, staring at the journal. His hands trembled slightly as he closed it. Alicia had finally remembered the truth, and now she had written it down. It was only a matter of time before she told someone, before she told the police, before she told his wife. Theo's stomach churned at the thought. Kathy had no idea who he really was. She thought he was the good, kind therapist, the man who had devoted his life to helping others. If she found out, no. He couldn't let that happen. There was only one way to stop Alicia now. He had to silence her for good. That night, Theo slipped into Alicia's room at the Grove. She was lying still, her breathing even. The drugs in her system made her drowsy, compliant. She didn't stir as he moved closer, the syringe hidden in his palm. One quick injection, and it would all be over. But as he reached for her arm, her eyes snapped open. She was awake, and she was waiting for him. Theo froze. Alicia's lips curled into the faintest smile. She knew. She had always known, and she had been waiting for him to make this final mistake. With slow, deliberate movements, she lifted her hand and pressed the nurse's call button. The alarm blared through the halls. Footsteps thundered outside the door. Theo took a step back, his mind screaming at him to run, but it was too late. The door burst open. Security stormed in, and in that moment, as Alicia sat up in bed, her eyes locked onto his with quiet victory, Theo knew it was over. He had lost. She had won. Alicia's final journal entry became the key piece of evidence in the case. It took days for the truth to unravel completely, but once it did, the world's perception of Alicia Berenson shifted overnight. She had never been a cold-blooded killer. She had been a victim. Theo Faber was arrested. His obsession with Alicia, his twisted sense of control, it all came to light. The world had been fooled by him, just as Alicia had been fooled by Gabriel. In the end, Alicia wasn't the silent one anymore. Theo was. The Silent Patient is a masterfully woven psychological thriller that explores obsession, trauma, and the devastating power of silence. Alex Michaelides crafts a haunting narrative that constantly shifts the reader's perspective, leading to a jaw-dropping twist that redefines everything we thought we knew. At its core, this novel is about the stories we tell ourselves, the lies we believe, the truths we bury, and the ways in which silence can be more powerful than words. Alicia's journey is not just one of survival, but of reclaiming her voice, of refusing to be erased. And in the end, the person who sought to control her was the one who lost everything. The Silent Patient finally spoke, and the world listened.